this video we're going to talk about Christian atheism. The concept was first formulated by the philosopher Hegel and then reinterpreted by Slavoj Žižek in his book Christian Atheism. I will introduce the viewer to Friedrich Hegel. We will trace the evolution of religion with Hegel as our guide and get some movie examples from Slavoj Žižek to understand the whole thing better. Christianity seems to occupy a unique position. Slavoj Žižek writes, for example, in his book Christian Atheism, is Christianity itself not unique among religions due to the fact that it cannot be accessed directly, but only through another religion, Judaism? Its sacred writing, the Bible, has two parts, the Old and the New Testament, so that one has to go through the first one to arrive at the second one. Okay, but what about other religions, and why is Christianity so special for Slavoj Žižek and Hegel and me? Well, let's start with who Hegel is. Let me give you a better example. Now, imagine a time where the Holy Roman Empire is just falling and Napoleon is coming to power. The printing press is booming, people are excited about something called the newspaper. We have not yet arrived at the railways and still travel by carriage. Beethoven is right now playing his piano and Goethe is scribbling eagerly to write his new story. Now, imagine the city of Berlin, Germany, in this time. In the university auditorium in Berlin, students are crowding to hear a professor who has discovered a groundbreaking theory. Like, think of Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein's golden theory of relativity. Who is this philosopher? He goes by the name of Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. His theory, the method of dialectics. His great book, Phenomenology of Spirit, made rooms go quiet with concentration. Hegel, a well-known philosopher in this time, you can imagine him a figure like Albert Einstein, so he was well-known. Students knew him, other philosophers, of course, knew Hegel. Some were even envious of him. One popular one, a name that maybe some know, is Schopenhauer. He was deep into philosophy. Hegel was studying the ancient Greeks in depth, but also writing about topics of his own time, like, for example, the French Revolution. Of course, I'm simplifying. Hegel and Einstein worked in completely different fields, and Marx never met Hegel. But this framing gives the viewer a clearer picture. Before we go into the story of God's child, Christ, we will now look into the last chapters of Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, that is, about religion. So, let's first start with the evolution of religion itself. Let us imagine a group of individuals. At the beginning we have individuals, so imagine some humans getting together and seeing the world for the first time. No technology, no idea what God could be. They look around and see plants, the light that's coming from above them, small creatures that, for example, have elongated bodies, so snakes, creatures that are bigger than them, have hooves rather than feet, and so on and so on. They also see one another, right? So they see humans. Not a lot of them, speaking of that time, but they also see humans. It's a simple relation to the world. Here, God is at first what Hegel calls abstract. God becomes plant, animal, and with time becomes human-like. So we went from them, the group of individuals, thinking that the light could be something God-like because it's transparent and coming from above and seems like a kind of holy substance, to animal God with a lion's head and a snake body, and their imagination starts working more and more, and they imagine a God with, for example, wings. So a human with wings. Hegel calls this natural religion. Now, the God takes a human form and is represented through sculptures and songs and fortune tellers. As an example, they imagine a thunder god who is like a father and his children who are also gods. Each has his own task. One takes care of health, one of the law, one of the underworld. All these divine beings are above us in something called the Olympus. I'm of course talking about the Greek gods, Zeus, his children, Hygeia, Ares, and so on. Here Hegel gives the Greek society of the polis as an example, right? Hegel calls this the art religion. Now gradually there exists only one Arthurian father, God, who is above, and who is exceptionally far from humans, more divine, more like a saint. Only prophetic figures, so prophets on earth, bear witness to his existence. This is how we know of religion. This is what we come up with when we think about religion, right? This is what is close to us when we hear God. All the other things are like myths and stories, and when you hear Zeus and when you hear Hercules and the Norse gods, we don't really take them serious. We see them in movies, stories, and so on. They are all for us in a kind of way outdated, right? The viewer should notice that we go from one stage to the next new stage. What changes here is only the form of relation, as Hegel calls it. Now, at last, we have Christianity. Think of it as a new stage. And it's also an important one. Something new happens now. With Christianity, the form of relation changes. With no religion we had this before. For God himself being incarnated in a human body, that group of individuals witness something new now. Of course, the people that have tarried with Christ and his journey know that he has gone through a long adventure. Let's call it that. We will not go into his whole story, but at the end we know that he gets tortured by the Romans and treated worse than an animal, let's say. His death happens at the cross, of course, and this is a gigantic sacrifice from God to humanity. There is something that dies with him on the cross, and we will go into more detail what I mean with that. Now we come to the concept of the big other. Slavoj Žižek's or Jacques Lacan, the psychoanalysts, concept of the big other. Sounds a bit strange. What is big and what is the other? To understand this better, we will delve into a movie that Slavoj Žižek himself mentions in the book Christian Atheism. In the old Soviet movie Alyosha's Love, we have a man being in love with this woman. Alyosha, a shy geologist, rides daily across the steppe just to see Zinka, the girl, at a lonely rail switch because she works there. He fumbles, gets mocked at the camp, so he gets mocked by his own people in a kind of way. Repeats the same timid ritual, so Alyosha always repeats going there and brings small gifts, stands nearby, saying almost nothing. Zinka plans to leave. Alyosha collapses alone in his tent. Then, suddenly, she decides in the movie to stay for him and walks towards the camp at dusk. The people, so the workers that were working with Alyosha and his companions who were mocking him, are watching from afar while Alyosha is walking towards the girl Zinka, his love. Okay, a quick summarization of the movie. A guy keeps going to the girl's workplace, which is outside on the railways. He brings gifts and so on. They get separated. Surprise, surprise, they meet each other again in the movie at last. While he slowly walks towards the girl he loves, you see one scene where they are towards each other, and another where you see on the hill the workers, the companions of the guy, Alyosha, who is in love. So you have one scene where you see the couple loving each other, and you have another scene where you see the workers on the hill who you see obviously stopped working and are observing this love. Now, imagine them not existing. This love would have no confirmation. Zinka and Alyosha would be alone, just privately, having a private feeling. That's what Slavoj Žižek calls it. So this collective on the hill that we see in the movie is the big other. It's a confirmation. It makes the whole scene more intense and shows these two lovebirds really having this moment, dramatic moment in a kind of way. This is one example of the big other that is described in the book Christian Atheism. There are other examples, of course. The big other is a concept who was made by the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, and it's one element of his whole theory, let's say. There's also the symbolic and the real and the imaginary. But the big other can also be something negative. Let's go back to the analysis we just did with Hegel about how we had these gods who were beyond us mortal, weak humans, right? So we had this god with a beard and watching all our steps, watching our sins. And you also had this with the Greeks, with Zeus and the Olympus. It's just like in the story of Alyosha's love. But this time the people on the hill are more of a problem. So now we come back to why Hegel and Slavoj Žižek's Christian atheism is such an important stage that humanity should be on. It's important to mention that Slavoj Žižek never mentions this concept of stages. It's from my side, but Hegel's analysis of religion goes through these different historical stages, and it ends with Christianity, the death of the God beyond. That's what he says, and that would be best for humanity. That what Slavoj Žižek kind of says. To go through this building we call Christianity. I will go further into what I mean with building, or how he calls it, edifice. Slavoj Žižek refers often Christianity to an edifice one must pass through. So if you read the book Christian Atheism, How to Be a Materialist, this is what he mentions a lot. Now I made a little twist out of this, and let's imagine a large building, most modern, the best shining one, a building of science. Everyone has their eyes on it. People pass through this building or accept it as a power, as an authority. But Christianity is the small building, no one really wants to go through that. Maybe the ones interested in conservative ideas or just for the aesthetics of Christianity. 2 quotes here with which we will end this video, and this is made by me so the viewer understands it better. Christianity is not something to be believed in, but something to be passed through. The point is not to remain within its structure, but to go through it, to experience the death of God and emerge on the other side where belief itself is transformed. And here I have the quote for the modern science building I was describing. Science now occupies a position once held by religion. It is our new big other, the ultimate authority we appeal to for truth, meaning, and legitimacy. Yet science itself functions as an ideology when it refuses to see its own limits. In the continuation of this series, we will analyze the edifice and, even more importantly, the surroundings of it. We will also explore how quantum mechanics has reached its limits, where even mathematicians and physicists are beginning to confront the boundaries of their own frameworks. So even Slavoj Žižek in his book Christian Atheism goes into quantum mechanics and calls it just numbers on a computer. There will also be sections showing how faith itself can still have a function. Big names like Niels Bohr, who actually was close to Albert Einstein and worked with him on quantum mechanics, will be mentioned.